just specifically for this event. So welcome, we're glad you're coming as part of this conversation if you weren't able to enjoy other parts of the conference. I'm seeing a lot of new friends, a lot of familiar faces now. I've seen some cross conversations happen from afar. You may have noticed Rob and I standing in a corridor, grinning like idiots if you were in conversation with other people, because of course we remember that there would be lots of cross-fertilization and new professional and personal linkages going on, so that's fantastic. This portion of the roundtable is quite informal. I don't know why I dressed so formally. I ran out of my more informal clothes over the course of the conference. And we have our keynotes speakers here, and our speaker Montes Nelson at the end. I'll say something about each of them in just a moment. But let me begin by saying what our format is for the conversation that's going to take place. I'll start by asking each of it's three-part or tripartite for the academics here. The first step will involve me asking each panelist to just take 5 minutes to talk about, to just summarize in broad, of course, his or her talk that took place at the conference, just so that we have it not only all up in the air for those that were here all week, but in the air for the first time for people that are just joining us today. So just 5 minutes about what the talk was about, and perhaps with a final tag-on comment as to what you feel the main problem is you want to draw our attention to. Because we all feel, it seems that we all feel the problem in one way or another. And then in the second part, part B, I have a series of questions, probably more accurately prompts, just to invite the panelists, there'll be 4, to begin the conversation a little more loosely, and they'll be hearing what each other has to say, and we'll take it from there. And then a conversation will be up in the air, kind of floating, and then we're very excited to have you involved then. And questions and comments, and it can be either. I hear some people make a fantastic comment, and they feel terribly guilty near the end of what they've offered, that they haven't put it in the form of a question, out of jeopardy or otherwise. And comments can be either comments. That's certainly fine. So, having said that, let's begin. Alana Mitchell is the, I should go all the line, I guess, and I have you in a different order. Hang on, I'll let that out. Alana, go! Sorry about that. Okay. On the end here, we have Peter Monson. He's a visual artist. He gave a talk entitled Alternative Strategies. Those of you who were at the conference would have seen his video artwork in the lobby and the monitors around the registration desk. And of course, the more static art pieces on one of the walls outside. Scott Benning, next to here, is a climatologist. And is there any looking at the big picture in like literal and figurative ways? He gave a talk entitled Responding to Climate Change in the Third Millennium. Okay. And next is Alana Mitchell, who gave a talk about the oceans entitled Finding Hope in the Carbon Crisis. And next to her is Louise Half, who was a poet, writer, and speaker. Her talk was entitled Green Earth, the Wounded Healer. Then we have Don Worster, who many of you heard just speak earlier today, an historian. His talk was entitled Facing Limits, the Limits to the Growth Controversy. So, the limits to growth controversy. And so I'm almost just going to love you for this because he spoke in a room adjacent only a short time ago, so I feel a little strange. But if you don't mind, just for a few people who are joining us for the first time, just letting us know your thesis. And we'll just proceed on that. Is that all right? Okay.
Is there really somebody here wasn't here earlier?
I should double check. Are there people joining us today?
Okay.
Sean.
Well, I've been interested in the book, The Limits of Growth, published in 1972, 40 years ago. A book that came out and in some ways disappeared from consciousness, although it seems most of you here have read it or heard of it. Recovering the controversy and
going back and revisiting some of the issues that he raised 40 years ago. But in the process, I started thinking, as historians do, well, what came before that, and what came before that. And so I got all the way back to Christopher Columbus, 1492, 500 years earlier. Basically, I've concluded that we've been living through a 500-year boom, economic boom, based on the discovery of the New World, Second Earth, the exploitation of its riches. Of course, this boom has owed a lot to human ingenuity, technology. It couldn't have happened just at any time throughout any point in history. It took a certain coming together of cultural factors along with material changes. But out of that encounter with the New World, I believe comes modern capitalism, all the way to globalization of the economy. Comes the American Revolution, the French Revolution, revolution in politics, modern liberalism, economic ideas about growth and competition. So many other things that followed as a consequence of that we've been taking for granted for a long time and hoping to extend into the future definitely through technology. I think when we look at that in a cold light, we have to ask ourselves whether technology can do everything that we once got from the earth. Can it supply not only water and soils and all the things on which life depends? We still depend on those things, but can it also can it really substitute for those vulnerable earth systems that we're now pressing hard against? I hope I presented some reason for being hopeful, but I'm not in the business of purveying hope just as a thing. I mean, it seems to me we need first to get an historical sense of how we got where we are, and we know we're going to go someplace else. That's the only hope that historians can offer. We know something next is coming, and what it will be is up to us to determine.
I was coming from the worldview of the tribe of my people, which is a Cree worldview, and also from the language of which I was born, and looking at the medicine wheel, and the medicine wheel is infinite. For example, when Dawn, everybody's presentation has really touched me, and I've been on a roller coaster ride. Excuse me for a minute. I want to have hope because my community is so behind. And I can only give a minuscule amount of the spiritual teachings that we practice, and just because I can't talk. I'm sorry, I'm really quite.
Maybe we should all have a minute of reflective thought here. So I'm a journalist, and the thing I was talking about was, I wish I had the poetry of Louise and Dawn, but what I look at is what scientists are finding out. So my focus is really, the philosophy of it is to democratize the information that is locked in the heads of scientists. And so what I do is travel around with them. Usually they let me tag along with field trips with them, and I look at the questions they're looking at and try to ask them as many questions as I can and then translate that for people like me who are not scientists. So that's what I've been doing. What I looked at my most recent book is what is happening to the global ocean. So it's one ocean, it's not a whole bunch of little tiny pieces of water, it's all an interconnected system. And I suppose there are climatologists like Scott who would say that the ocean and the atmosphere are one system as well. I could never quite get there philosophically, so I started thinking about the ocean as a single system. And then I looked at it as if it were a patient. What would happen if we sent that to the doctor and said, okay, tell us what it's, how it's doing. Because people at the time that my book came out a couple of years ago were not doing that. They were not looking at, the trend lines and the health of the global ocean. There have been a couple of papers in the last couple of years that have looked at that and have also looked at how the ocean as a whole is being affected by the human hand. But that hadn't been done at all when I was doing my research. In fact, I went from research ship to research ship to research ship as a journalist, tagging along on all of these expeditions. And these were all really first class, absolutely world first class scientists who allowed me to take a peek into their worlds. And I would go from one ship to another and I would say, wow, this is what I just learned over, on that research ship. And the scientist I was with would say, really? So there was this whole sense of not having a sense of what was happening altogether. And what I discovered, is that in every single case, the trend lines are going the wrong way. And the thing I talked about the other day was really the three major ways in which carbon dioxide is affecting, in the atmosphere, is affecting the global ocean. And so that really has become the focus of the work I've been doing. Scientists call these three effects the evil troika, because they're worse together than they are each one alone. They're greater than the sum of their parts. The three pieces of that have to do with the fact that when we burn fossils, which we call fuels, we put extra ancient carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And we all are familiar with what it's doing to the atmosphere. We call it, scientists now call it planetary destabilization. They don't call it global warming or climate change. They call it destabilization. And so we're all familiar with that. We're fluent, I think, with what's happening there. But we're not as fluent with what's happening to the ocean. So roughly a third of the ancient carbon that's been put up into the atmosphere since we started burning fossils, so call it 250 years or so, has gone into the global ocean where it dissolves into the ocean and chemically reacts with the ocean water to create carbonic acid. And so that's one of the issues. The ocean is becoming more acidic, and that's critically important to life in the ocean because over time, as the ocean becomes more and more acidic, it actually starts to dissolve the calcium carbonate shells of creatures that live in the ocean. But in the meantime, it's also destabilizing the internal chemistry of creatures that live in the ocean, as scientists are becoming more familiar with. This is a relatively new phenomenon, only been described for, really the very first scientific paper by biologists was in 1999, looking at the effects of all of this changing pH to the global ocean. The global ocean is now 30% more acidic than it was before we started burning fossil fuels, which is absolutely incredibly steep. That's a very, very rapid and dramatic shift in a pH, in a chemical descriptor that is very, very difficult to change. I mean, pH is not made to be changeable. It's buffered, multiply buffered, so that it really should rarely change. It's one of the key. It's not only a key descriptor of life. It's like, when a baby is born, one of the very first things they do is check the pH of the baby's blood to make sure that it's in the range of normal. The range of possible life in your bodies depends on a pH range that is very, very, very narrow. And we've already changed the range of the pH of the global ocean more than the range of possible life in your body. So it's a dramatic, rapid change. So that's one of the big things. That's the one that keeps scientists awake at night, is the whole pH issue. But you combine that with the increased temperature of the ocean, so the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere holds heat against the body of the planet, and about 80% of the extra heat that is in the atmosphere as a result of all that carbon dioxide has been absorbed into the ocean. And scientists for a long time thought that was going to be okay, that it wouldn't really have a big effect on the ocean. In fact, it's having quite a large effect on who lives where in the ocean and how they reproduce. For example, many creatures in the ocean reproduce on heat to sunlight, hours of sunlight that they're exposed to, which hasn't changed. And many others reproduce on heat to temperature, which has changed. So they're reproducing in different phases But in fact, they evolved to reproduce in concert so that they fed each other, so that there was this complex dance of life in the ocean that worked. That's breaking down sometimes. So that's one of the effects of temperature. And then the third thing is that there are wide swaths of the global coastal ocean that are dead zones. So that means they have little or no dissolved oxygen. Most of those, we have about 407 in the coastal ocean, coastal parts of the ocean. Most of those are caused by phosphorus and nitrogen from farms, flowing into the ocean and, making algal blooms, which then the algae die, falls to the bottom of the ocean floor and are decomposed by bacteria, which use up the oxygen. So you have this great swath of water along the bottom, eventually up in some cases to the top of the water column that is devoid of oxygen, and that means nothing lives there. So these are literal graveyards on the bottom of the ocean floor, or many of the water column are literally just deserts. There's nothing there. 3 of these 407, however, are caused by climate change. They're caused by changes to current, changes in temperature, and these 3 massive dead zones that have recently been discovered, just very recently. One is off the coast of Oregon, and 2 are off the coast of Africa, in parts of the global ocean current system that should be absolutely teeming with life, and they're not. So what you have there are, we call, scientists call the ocean warm, breathless, and sour. That's the descriptor that is happening with the ocean. And the reason it matters, I suppose you all know this, but the reason it matters is that when the ocean becomes warm, breathless, and sour, it doesn't support life in the same way that it used to. Well, how exactly that will pan out as we put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and as the ocean becomes more acidic, warmer, and more breathless, is an unknown. But if you look back to the paleontological record on ocean chemistry change, which is what we're talking about, you realize that those 3 changes to the ocean, so sour, breathless, and warm, are exactly what happened in each of the past 5 mass extinctions on the planet's history. So we're setting a table, in effect, for a mass extinction. So where the hope is in all of that, I guess, is where we'll get to in the discussions during this panel.
So I talked about climate change, and I do this a fair amount. Whether it's at a conference like this where the organizers generously gave me as long as I wanted to talk, which never happens. Or more often where somebody said, "Can you summarize that in about 10 minutes?" Versus other times when somebody's sitting next to me on the airplane. So in any of those,
do you believe in
climate change? Yeah, you get that all the time.
I believe in egg ferret and then
I had it all the time with long division when I was in grade school, in 5th grade, and I always turn around and say, "Well, do you believe in long division?" Because I hate it. So no matter whether it's a 2-minute summary or an hour-long talk, I always do 3 parts, never just one. The 3 parts are simple, serious, solid, and I won't stop with serious. So the first thing is simple. You hear about how complex the system is, and the Earth is this incredible complex system. I mean, in Don's talk, we talked about back in 1972, we thought we could fit all those arrows on a bed sheet. And now the bed sheets have gotten very large indeed. You see giant computer centers in Woodbridge National Lab, or even in some basement in Washington where they make all these calculations. But you know what? It doesn't take all that to understand climate change. Any one of us has plenty of life experience to understand how this works. And something else that Don said, which is wonderful, spending some time with Don this week, he said, everybody understands that climate is changing, but what we can't accept is that people have caused it. And I guess I would say people don't cause climate change. Heat causes climate change. So it isn't us warming the globe. It's heat. And heat is literally emitted by CO2. And I know that's not how most of my colleagues will explain it to you, but it's true. You can measure, and it was measured in 1863. It's been measured thousands of times. Anybody who can measure heat coming out of a sample of gas will get exactly the same results. The stuff literally emits heat. And it doesn't emit heat because greed is bad. It doesn't emit heat because capitalism is evil. It emits heat because it has 3 atoms. You know, it's just doing what molecules do. It's just the way it is. It's like it goes bounce, these little molecules, you know, wiggling, wagging up there in the sky, and they send out photons of thermal energy that can be measured. That sounds all techy and weird, but I mean, you can measure photons of thermal energy, for goodness sakes. If you've ever stood near a warm fire and you felt that heat on your face, if you've ever turned on the burner on the stove and you felt the radiation coming off of that burner, you know about this stuff. When night comes, there isn't any sun, but it doesn't get infinitely cold. Why not? Because the warm sky emits thermal energy down on us and keeps the Earth from freezing solid all the way to the bottom of the ocean every night. Thank God. And if you put twice as many of these heat-emitting molecules up in the sky, about a problem. You get this much extra heat. This is a 4-watt light bulb for those of you who are too young to remember any of this. So 4 watts on every square meter of the Earth forever. Right? It's not a lot. It's only 4 watts. But 4 watts on every square meter of the planet, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, like basically forever. We'll talk about in a second how long forever is. But, you know, that would make the ground warmer. Do you believe me? Do you believe it will warm? This is all there is to it. It's really as simple as that. Heat warms things up. The law of hot. So, this is the simple part. Now for the serious part. It's freaking forever. Okay? It's really, really in the air for a long time. CO2 is not like other kinds of pollutants. Right? We got ground level ozone, we got NOx, we got carbon dioxide, all this urban pollution that we're used to when we talk about pollution. The reason why those things are pollutants is because they're extremely reactive gases. They hurt us. They get in your nose and you sting. You know, you ever been to Los Angeles on a summer day? CO2 is not like that. CO2 is reactive all the way as far as it's going to go. It's the last stage of busted up. It's completely oxidized. It's done. Once it gets in the air, it ain't going anywhere, except the oceans. But even the oceans only get slow. You said a third of the anthropogenic CO2 is in the oceans. A third of the industrial CO2, fossil carbon, is in the oceans. But it's only in the very, very top of the oceans. The oceans are really deep. The oceans are 13,000 feet deep. Think about that. 13,000 feet deep. And only the top, maybe 1,000 feet, has seen that CO2, has touched the air since the Industrial Revolution. The huge volume of the ocean is icy cold and pitch black dark, and it lays on the bottom of the ocean. And to stir that stuff up to the top takes a tremendous amount of energy. The only way to get that deep water to come up and touch the surface is to make the surface wicked cold. It only happens in the Arctic and the Antarctic, and only about 1/1000th of the ocean gets cold enough to sink to the deep, Davy Jones locker every year. So it takes 1,000 years to turn the ocean over once, in which time it'll come 1/3 of the way to equilibrium with the atmosphere. It'll take 3 turns of that great big ocean stir bar to get the ocean to take up all the fossil CO2 it's ever going to take up. And that's 3,000 years from now. Think about what we were doing 3,000 years ago. I wasn't around. The Roman Empire, that's not near far enough. Ancient Greece, no further back than that. 3,000 years, this stuff is going to be in the air. This is another weird, bad thing about this, is that we've just barely gotten started burning this stuff. There's 7 billion people on Earth, and only 1 billion of us burn a lot of fossil fuel. The other 6 billion are hungry to start burning. In the next 2 human generations, the population of the Earth isn't going to increase very much. But under, Plan A, what we're planning to do, the amount of CO2 burning is going to increase by a factor of 5. Okay? The human population may increase by 20 or 30%, but the fossil fuel burning will increase by hundreds of percent. It's not population growth. People are already here. But they're hungry, and they're starving, and they're bored. And they want to start living like us, and I don't blame them. So this is really a problem for us, and it's going to be a problem for our descendants, and it's going to be a problem that's going to define the next millennium in the same kind of way that the big stories Don told defined the last millennium. The stories of exploration and the rise of industrialism and global capitalism, the stories of religious strife, those were the stories of the second millennium. Colonialism, decolonialism, imperialism, whatever. That stuff, those are the big themes. We got new themes now. And the themes are pretty scary. So, what about solvable? I told you I wasn't going to stop with that scary stuff in the middle. I've been reading this book by Stephen Gardner called The Perfect Moral Storm, The Ethical Tragedy of Climate Change. It's a tough read for people like me because he's a professional ethicist. It's hard to read that stuff. In my opinion, Gardner conflates, that's one of your humanities words, conflates the concepts of carbon and sin. Okay? He talks as if burning fossils is I mean, you can almost hear the Puritan, that we're sinning by doing this stuff, and we're going to pay, and it's, it's like, wow, this is like stuff from my childhood, it's scary. So I have a problem with this. I heard Don's magnificent lecture right before lunch, and I understand that there are limits to growth. That exponential growth as a way of life is like embracing cancer, right? I mean, this growth for growth's sake, no limits. Oh my gosh, you can't fit that on a finite-sized ball floating around in space. And the reaction to that book, The Limits to Growth, I heard at the Heartland Institute when I went there to tell them how serious climate change was, they railed about the limits to growth. They railed about the Club of Rome. And you can hear it in the political right that the response to climate change is that if we have to deal with climate change, we have to accept that leftist political view that growth is limited, and therefore it's not true. Talk about putting the cart before the horse. I mean, they are taking the point of view that the solutions are anathema to me, therefore there's no problem. Therefore the physics is wrong. Therefore he doesn't work things out. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with these people? But we have a problem on the left too. We have a problem in that we tend to think that climate change is merely a symptom of this larger problem of greed gone bad, of unlimited rapacious capitalism, and that until we solve that problem, we'll be stuck with this other one. So okay, we got climate change. I'm going to put that in my pile of chips, and it means my side wins. And that means I get to lord it over the assholes at the Heartland Institute. But social scientists have talked about like axes. I don't know where you get these, but you got communitarian on one end and individualist on the other. It's time for me to shut up, isn't it? And you got egalitarians up here and individualists down there. And this has sort of been spun as a fight between communitarian egalitarians on the one side and hierarchical individualists on the doesn't go back to Columbus, it goes back to ancient Greece. And if we say we have to wait until we solve the biggest divide in human culture since ancient Greece, before we fix the carbon problem, we're screwed. We can't do that. We got to solve this anyway. We got to solve it anyway, even though it pits us against each other, even though we live on a limited planet, we got to solve it anyway. And we will.
Wow, for a guy that had difficulty with long division, which, by the way, I can relate to. I'm thinking, and I'll just follow up on some of your thoughts there, that heat doesn't warm things up. And this is just sort of an observation just made. I think, according to the far right, fossils are an illusion, but they're to trick us. So if we burn them, maybe that's an illusion too. They need the repercussions of that. So my talk, it was a pleasure to be in this milieu. I don't know what the hell I'm doing up here. Because I didn't actually graduate from anything since high school. So I am totally honored to be here to be able to present my view as a person that learned most of what they've come up with by walking on the land. So I'm an artist, as you've heard. And the only reason I'm an artist is because that's a title that seems to fit some of the goofy stuff that I do. I started out, though, by having this idea that art was, I don't know, creativity contained in some kind of a flat surface, like a canvas. And because I lived in the landscape, I thought, well, it must mean landscape paintings, plus I couldn't get anybody to sit for me. So, I mean, who would sit for you, 30 miles out of the bush? Thank you, Teresa. She did sit for me a couple of times, but 30 years later. So I, started working with the land. And I realized by painting it at first I have to drive 30 miles to find a scene that I wanted to paint. After the first year of plein air painting, it was 15 miles. As time went on, you know what? I didn't have to get in the truck. And before long, I didn't have to leave the studio. Why is that? Did the country get more beautiful? Or did I just wake up? It was an awareness that came into me, and my eyes saw more colors. They saw more beauty. They started to notice, feel the spirit. I don't know if any of you were at Carson's talk last night, but he talks about that. The thrumming, it is not an actual sound. It comes from the herds of caribou. When you pay attention, you start to notice things. Anything you put your focus on grows. I think we're at that transitional point, because we have to be, or we're close. That we are going to become enlightened, those of us who survive, or we're going to perish. And as I've said many times before, perishing, everybody does it. Maybe it's not so bad. In the bigger picture, this planet will carry on with the other life forms, I imagine, until the sun explodes, which I think is quite some time down the road. I could be wrong. Oh, let's see. No. So, I can understand Louise when silence is the only thing that actually speaks to the enormous future that potentially awaits us that we've heard about the last few days and for most of our lives we've seen. I think that within that silence, we can find the answer. If we sit and consider what is right here, right around us, right now. I mean, I heard somewhere recently that any toxin. The antidote, not the antidote, the antidote. The antidote is within a few meters. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Often the roots of the plant that stings you as its antidote. I could be making this up, but I heard it somewhere. And I actually believe it. I mean, even without knowing the facts, I often believe things because they feel right. I have been following my intuition for the last 22 years since I gave up my job. Opportunities have arisen that I could never have imagined would present themselves. Unbelievable synchronicities have occurred to make the most astounding things take place in our lives. Where there was absolutely no hope, we won. Things manifested that were beyond our wildest dreams. I think within this massive battle that is Mordor itself at our doorstep, the answer is right in there somewhere. I don't know what it is, except I do know what it is for me. And that is to creatively act wherever possible. And if you are completely blocked and you feel hopeless, look for that little crack. Wherever you can, move your toes forward. It's just assembly. Wherever you can, do the thing that feels the most right. Even if it means financial insecurity, even if it means the demise of everything you've held dear. If it feels right, bloody well get out there and do it.
I'll just take a few minutes. Thank you so much. I suffered a little bit of intimidation here with all these great speakers and very educated people. And I'm coming from such a different background. But I want to share you a little bit of a story. A month ago, my 92-year-old mother died. She was a woman who fought with life, and life fought with her. And, I arrived just before she passed, so she recognized me, and she uttered my childhood name. And then she asked me to put her on a toilet. Right to the very end, she eliminated all her stuff before she died. And she was strong about it. But the other thing she wanted was a little bit of water. My niece took a sponge and wiped her mouth, and she shook her head. That wasn't enough. So I took the sponge and I dribbled it into her mouth. And I tell you this story because we've been talking a lot of contaminated water. Water is an old and ancient voice. It has spoken to me. It has voice. I know the scientists and biologists probably don't believe this, but I also know in water studies, in books, maybe they call it pop psychology, that water, that snowflakes and waters, they all speak if you allow it and you listen to it. As I watched my mother breathe her many breaths as she declined, I looked at the wind. I couldn't see it, but I saw it passing through her mouth. And ever so peacefully, my mother escaped this earth. And I then looked for her soul as the wind passed. Only I didn't see her soul. All I saw was serenity and peace. My father was different when he died. He fought all the way. He was pissed right off. He was telling the world where to fuck off. You know, in essence, that's what he was doing. And I know I've got several elders who've done the same, who've actually swore in their deathbed because they were so mad. So, but I'm telling you this because my paper was on those 4 principles of what this discovered. The air, the earth, the fire, and the water, and the earth is composed of the backbone on a rock. The rock too has voice. I'm coming from a spiritual base from what my elders have taught me, have come from ceremony. And like the people that we listened to last night, I was almost in tears. I wanted to rush out and just cry. Because when that man spoke of dreams, and he was dreaming the caribou, and then he was listening to the song and the thunder of those caribou. In our ceremonies, these spirits come. I don't have to prove it to anybody. There's enough literature out there for you to educate yourself. Because when you go to an alternative state, and they were not, these people that went on this caribou walk, they were entered an alternative state. Although they thought that this was a reality, it was an alternative state. They were on a vision quest. That's what my people do in ceremony. And that's what my paper was all about. And coming from the language base, which is Cree, and I was telling Rob this morning, for the word I, this organ, this I, actually translates to big infinite heavens. And I was listening to Don talk about these two, Columbus and this other chap, who made the map, and pushing the limitations. Well, my people have been doing it for years. And your people have too, but you've forgotten. And that's where you need to go back. And is to wound your own damaged soul. And I'm not saying, I'm not a religious Bible thumper. I've had enough of that, thank you very much. I went to residential school, who needs that? I'm not one of those people, nor am I going to say, come to my sweat lodge. You've got to humble yourself to figure it out. And hence, you've got to humble yourself to talk to those corporations, to help them find their souls in a good and healthy way without proselytizing. I think that's the word, right? Sometimes I make up my own English words. But anyhow, that's what my paper was about, is going back to humanity. I'm a pagan, and pagan actually literally means from the hearth. People always think it's coming from, oh, by the way, the other word that was really interesting to me for us women when they call us witches, tell them blessed be, because we are hags, and that's what witch means, is blessed woman. Wisdom in Latin, and well, many of you probably know this, and Greek it means to taste life. In my language, knowledge means I've eaten and tasted life from my heart. And I expel it out to you. So I go back to my language and to my spiritual teachings to hope, to dream about the possibilities. I, like Peter, I'm an earth-based woman, I'm an artist, I'm a secret artist, I'm a poet primarily. I believe in the healing of the human soul, and that's where my poetry comes from. And I feel I am really enriched by everything that I've heard and learned. I feel totally naive, but I'm so grateful to be here. I like us now.
So the speakers here have accepted a certain level of risk entering into such a general, free-ranging discussion that can go anywhere. And I'm with them on this because my questions don't make any sense now. So I'm going to do something just a little bit different if panelists don't mind it. Nobody has to speak, anybody can say pass. I was just going to invite Dawn, Alana, and Scott into the conversation with the following question. Basically, all of you are going to get up tomorrow or Monday and get back to work. People are very busy, do things. So I just wouldn't mind if Dawn and Alana and Scott wouldn't mind sharing with us what keeps you going, given the difficulties involved in the field, whether it's the intellectual engagement, a literary one, an artistic one, etc. Would you want to do that?
Quick, actually, my desk calendar. I just keep consulting it. I put things down, and there they are. I really actually, it's not some deep moral sense of mission, although I think I have some of that, but I do want to see things addressed. But actually, I find these issues quite interesting. I find I'm meeting this afternoon on a trip, taking a Beijing for the next few months. Why am I going there? It's in my best a calendar. I got a contract to be there, but I just find it extraordinarily interesting to see how Chinese these days are dealing with the same issues that we are dealing with in North America. I can find hope there if I want to. I can find pessimism, grief, and gloom if I want to, but I just find it extraordinarily fascinating to watch how human beings interact with places, the earth, etc., wherever they are, and it's always instructive to me. They're just kind and generous and feeding so well in the process. So if you don't get some personal satisfaction out of addressing these issues, if you just simply go around because you think this is a social or moral obligation, you're not going to have much fun at it. I think there should be some excitement, intellectual interest, and moral interest, and a study interest in all these issues. If you don't have that, nothing's going to keep it going.
Well, how do you knock on that? It's just, for me, part of it is intellectual and professional, because I'm trained as a journalist, and journalists are trained to find the best stories out there, right? We're supposed to uncover things that other people don't know about and explain them to people in ways that they can understand, in ways that are supposed to be honest and legitimate and hopefully entertaining, you know, at the best. And I've spent now more than 20 years, more than 25 years as a journalist. And I've written about a lot of different things. And it seems to me that the very most important stories, the best stories, the ones that simply have not been told the way they need to be told, have to do with how humans are affecting our life support systems. These are, when I worked at the Globe, I worked at the Globe for 14 years as a reporter and feature writer. And, you know, every single time I got to write one of those stories that I thought was the most important thing in the world to write about. I had to write 3 or 4 stories about the one-legged dog, you know, and that was the sort of the way it all went. You had to pay to write the stories that really matter. And I think that's pretty common at most news outlets, which is probably why I don't work at the newspaper anymore. So part of it is just a professional interest that these are the most important stories. These are the ones that people don't know about, the ones that, you know, that are hidden. There's a subterranean world that exists, that scientists are understanding that most of us aren't. And there's also a professional, sort of the taxpayer sense that most of this research is done in the public domain, and we don't get it explained to us. And so there's that sense of wanting to explain what our society is coming at. But apart from all of that, it's a search for joy. People often ask me, you know, if I do this because I'm angry, if I write all this stuff, and as I travel around the world working with scientists, whether I get consumed by anger, but actually I get consumed by joy. And that's the driving force in putting these stories out there. It seems to me that it's quintessentially human what we're going through now. It's a function of the legacy of our species, the legacy of our evolution to be going through what we're going through now. Not that I think this is inevitable, but just simply that it is very human. And our response to it has been very human, and it will continue to be that. And part of it is just the joy of seeing that unfold in whatever way it does unfold. And of course, I hope, for my sake, and my children's sake, and all of our sakes, that it goes in a different direction from the way it's going now. That's my personal hope. And I think it will go that way. I see evidence that we're shifting course to some degree, but there's the joy of the observation, and that's what keeps me going.
Well, I guess my initial reaction to saying it's done is you said your desk calendar, mine lives on my phone. And I just looked at I got 9 o'clock Monday morning, something. And there's that level of sort of mundane going from one thing to the next through our lives. But I'm so blessed that there's more, right? That I don't just study the breathing of the earth. We literally have a meeting on Monday afternoon about using satellite data to try to actually map the photosynthesis and decomposition of carbon back into the atmosphere, accounting for all the winds and clouds and stuff, and that's just way cool stuff to work on. I mean, it's fun. It's really, honestly fun. And I'm so fortunate to be able to do stuff like that. On Wednesday, I'm supposed to go to southern Louisiana, where I'm working with a small village called Pointe-aux-Chênes. It's French for a point with oak trees on it, and it's all that's left in the Mississippi Delta. There are all these little creeks that used to be, it's just bizarre. I mean, where I'm from, the creek is at the bottom of the valley, and down here the creeks are actually the high ground, because the sediment is deposited in the Gulf. And so these towns, these little villages are way the heck out on tight little roads out into the ocean. It used to be ocean. One huge generation went from forest, a marsh, a open water. And all the houses are up on stilts. The poor people live in trailers on cinder blocks, and the more wealthy people live in houses on steel islands, 20 feet off the ground, because every time the hurricanes come, there's breaking waves over their houses. The sociologist that working with them there at the University of Lawrence says that most of those outside scientists come in and take one look. It takes us like half a day to say, well, these people are screwed. There's no hope for them. But the native tribal leader that we work with in Pointe-aux-Chênes says, don't tell me that. We already know that. What we want you to do is help us to live with dignity with the time we have left, with the house we have left, with the village we have left. And it's like, wow, if they can do that, they can certainly carry on. There's that song from my youth, and the tagline was, rejoice, we have no choice, but carry on.
Hang on for a moment, we'll see who wants to speak. I think we have a final question I'll ask before we move towards audience and Q&A. And as I say, not each person needs to speak. If somebody would like to, please just raise your hand. Are environmental goals, broadly speaking, and economic goals finally compatible? In other words, are stronger environmental regulations and some advances in green technology enough? Or do you think we might need a more radical social change if we're going to get through the next few hundred years? Anybody has an opinion? Just raise your hand and raise your mic. Yeah.
I'm going to take on Scott over here.
Because if Scott is saying we can't change human nature, we're going to have to, if we're tied to changing human nature, it's all lost. I agree, we're going to change human nature. We have got to make some cultural changes. Things we've learned and ways we've perceived that aren't part of our intrinsic nature. And at the core of those, it seems to me, is an attitude toward wealth. What is money, or what is wealth, what is well-being? How those things become intertwined and so on. And if we don't tackle that, I don't think tackling climate change issues will be enough. As I said this morning, there are a lot of other things going on besides climate change here. Biodiversity laws, et cetera, et cetera. They're all intertwined, but at the heart of all of them, I think, is a drive towards wealth, accumulation of wealth, the wealth of nations, etc. I have to believe there's a cultural thing there that we've got to tackle. So are economic goals and environmental goals compatible? Well, they can be. I mean, all economies come out of the great economy of nature. I wrote a book called Nature's Economy. There's just one economy out there. That is the economy of nature, and if we don't see that, then our economies will always be in trouble. But we have got to make some changes in our economic culture and economic way of thinking. Our cultural attitudes about wealth and what it means, and why our experience is defined in terms of wealth, in monetary and quantitative terms, or we're not going to solve any of these problems. I mean, we didn't get into burning fossil fuels and so on just accidentally. I mean, we were driven there by a desire to increase energy production, to increase textile production, to increase locomotion, to make money. Left or right, communists or socialists or capitalists. So I do think we've got to go back and deal with some cultural changes and what you call those regulations or not. Some of them are regulatory, but some of them are just basically the way we think and perceive the world.
I don't know why I just grabbed that mic, but it must have been some intuitive thing. So here I sit now, and I have to speak into this. But I guess, I think I'm echoing the same thing. The economy is defined by the natural capitalism that we're surrounded by. A great book, by the way, Natural Capitalism, Amory Lovins, and I remember the other guy's name, a couple other authors of that book. But Amory Lovins runs is the director, I guess, or CEO of the Rocky Mountain Institute in Aspen, Colorado, or just outside of Aspen. And he totally believes that it's possible to get off fossil fuels and nuclear, especially coal and oil and nuclear within the next 40 years. It's just a matter of balancing, things and making things more efficient. I mean, this community center that we just were instrumental in working on it back in my home community, uses the same amount of fuel to heat a 10,000 square foot building as the old Quonset community center would have utilized had it been running all the time, just in its kitchen. So, the walls are made out of bales, the timbers are made out of fine beetle killed wood, and somehow we've taken, in that community, we've taken a dysfunctional community with no membership and turned it into a thriving, metropolis by rural standards, which actually sustains its own economy. It, from time to time, even hires a janitor, maybe once a month for about 4 hours, but still, there was nothing going on, right? So I mean, there's other problems come with that. People having to drive way the hell out to the sticks to go to a dance, and the burdens that come with that environmentally. But I think, the more we focus on this, anything is possible. And it's just we have to readjust our economy and readjust what kind of burdens we wish to place on the planet. I know that taking a serious cut in pay about 22 years ago and reducing my personal livelihood, I suppose, by 60%, led to a far happier existence for me and a far more rewarding existence. I'm going to add to another previous idea or a different point, I guess, and that is I spent 15 years tortured by this impending disaster and what I could or could not do about it. And then I turned it into a game. And now it's absolute joy, really. We're unless the road takes us out, there's going to be some way to do it from a visual perspective. You know, I think John Muir needs to climb up into the trees with me and watch the storms come and just cling to the potentially breaking trees. And everywhere, you know, there's this opportunity to engage with life. And you know what? If you don't have any money, you go to the thrift store and you buy $3 cross-country skis, as long as you have snow, which is also fleeting. You can go out your back door and it costs you exactly $3. I don't need the $500 skis. I mean, we find different ways of creating economy. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, blah, 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 all that, right? The end result is your own creativity rises to the challenge. And when you exercise your own creativity, it's bloody rewarding in any kind of way except maybe financially. I haven't lost any weight in the last 22 years. I'm doing okay. And I want to have, or give the sense, I guess, that I cannot in any way imagine a more exciting or enriching existence than the one I presently have, because I quit my damn job.
Yeah, perhaps I'll just go. Please go ahead, Scott. I was just going to say, after Scott, if anybody's moved to say anything else at all, please just raise your hand and then we'll go to questions.
Well, I guess I'd like to say I agree with Don that cultural change is necessary. That living within limits is it's not really up to us. We're going to have to live the limits are there, whether we live with them or are forced to live with them. That's the way to go. This. But I think it's really a false choice because I think I'm not arguing that just tweaking capitalism is enough. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it's not, given that we already have 7 times as many people on the planet as there are people that burn fossil fuel on the planet, it's probably not practical to just have us all cut our fossil fuel use by a factor of 7, even it out across the rest of the planet. Because I don't know if any of you tried it, cut fossil fuel use by 6/7, but it'd be pretty dramatic. Maybe you have actually. You haven't gained any weight.
I haven't gained any weight, but I did drive my car here.
When you move to China, you cut it dramatically.
Yeah. But factor 7 is a lot, and people are going to resist that. I guess what I'm saying is that the tough thing is getting from here to there. I agree that the culture has to change, that we have to live within limits, that we have to find a way as a global society, a global civilization, to flatten the curve. But the really unpleasant way to get there is those very, very steep downhill curves in the limits to growth. It is economic collapse, catastrophe, war, disaster of like nearly biblical proportions. I'm not sure I'm willing to sign up for that as the only way to get to the flat line. I'm agnostic about economics. I don't know how that works, but I'm willing to consider all the alternatives to find a way to a flat line that doesn't involve catastrophic depopulation and collapse along the way. It seems like wishing for that is just rubs me the wrong way. I can't choose
the cliff on purpose.
Wishes.
No. I got to try to find a way to level the curve without falling off the edge.
It just strikes me that we're having this discussion about economics just as we're also looking at this political scenario in the States, where this issue is not on the table. Nobody's talking, as far as I can tell, am I wrong, about the high carbon world, planetary destabilization that we're talking about. So it's not a function, as far as I can tell, in this election cycle, and it certainly hasn't been in Canada either. It is in parts of Europe, and that's clear, and it just strikes me that there needs to be a link, perhaps, between economics and politics and culture, and what voters are thinking about. And what I long for here is not so much an economic discourse, although I know that has to be part of it. It's for us to have a discourse for us as a human species and how we can survive on this planet, because the direction we're going in now is going to work again to last forever. So, and what you see at the international climate talks, and I've been to two of the last 3 Kyoto discourses, what you see there is a tribal, in the sense of a tribal discussion. So you're talking about, what's good for China is not good for the U.S., so therefore the U.S. won't support it. Or India is saying, no, we can't do this because it would privilege another country that we aren't in favor of. And you have all these discussions that are not discussions of how the human species can survive here. It's really, and all the other species that we're dependent on. It's a discussion about which little boys club is going to get something at the expense of another little boys club. That's how it seems to work in these international meetings. And so what I long for is a discussion that will somehow take into account not only our own species, but all the other ones that we depend on. And that I have not heard in the international forum. And I think that if we had that discussion, that we could leap over some of these economic issues and it would become plain than what we need to do.
Thank you, panelists, for agreeing to the academic relay team with the microphone, the Toronto and working within our infrastructure. I appreciate that very much. All right, I have a floor mic just here. So I'm quite happy to walk around for it. Let's move to comments and questions from people who doesn't have already. Jill, you're next. Just turn it on and meet people halfway.
Hello, my name is Bob Smith, and I've been very intrigued by this conversation. It's actually moving me in different directions. I wanted to bring attention about a city in Saudi Arabia called Masdar, and it's built on sustainability. It's a city that's been built over the last few years. Maybe about 30,000 people live there. But it's a sustainable type of environment where all aspects of construction have been taken into account, which include the carbon prints of all machinery and activities, cement, wood, everything that goes into the city. And I'd like to encourage everybody to take a look at the website of Masdar, because it's what I think is going to be the future of our environment. It is a city that's been developed and supported by the government of Saudi Arabia. And I'd like to encourage our government to do the same sort of thing here, because it takes in the full life cycle of everything that goes into that construction. I was wondering from the panel's perspective, have you ever heard of that city called Masdar? M-A-S-D-A-R. And if you Google it, look into it from Masdar, sustainable city, and you see some very interesting engineering concepts. You're going to carbon content, what in mind the board to build this, to put steel to the city, glass, everything. And if we can encourage the government in Alberta to get behind that kind of concept as a model for Alberta, Canada, North America to go on.
Anybody want to respond to that?
information, Amy?
Well, I just think it's phenomenal. Saudi Arabia is the center of growth and production of land to be undertaking this. I think that is, that everybody in the world practically realizes we've got to design things in new ways. And even his whole livelihood based on oil. That's very hopeful.
The other piece to that is, sorry, I mean, the other piece to that is, I know that we're talking about a very wealthy country, Saudi Arabia, but, you know, people always talk about how there's no recipe for fixing this issue. And people don't really think that we have the technology to do it, but, you know, the scientists I talk to all over the world say that we absolutely do have the technology to deal with this. This is not a technological issue anymore at this point. This is a cultural issue. Wanting to do it, which is why that example from NASDAR is so fascinating.
I was just recently in Nova Scotia, and of course I'm extremely interested in these kinds of things because I think that is the answer. I mean, we can build, even in northern Alberta, we built the basement to that building, which has never ever had the heat on. All of our water is down there. All of our things that would be in danger of freezing are in the basement, but because we super insulated it, it has never gone below 10 degrees Celsius over an entire winter and 3 other seasons. So, and then I was in Nova Scotia, and people have always told me, yeah, solar, you can't, blah, blah, renewables, you can't use them for industrial purposes. Well, right beside where the Blue Nose is being refurbished, or just was, which is our fastest, whatever, old technology sailing ship vessel. And actually by the same person that was refurbishing that, a gentleman by the name of Peter Kingley. He has a system of mirrors, very simple, on the back of the trailer, which he can pull outside of his tent, or his stretched sort of building, whatever those are made out of plastic, and put it in the sun, and within 20 minutes, melt 5 pounds of bronze. And I'm going, oh, that's crazy. But of course it is, right? Of course it's possible. I mean, we've all burnt ourselves and frogs and ants and stuff with magnifying glass. Or, oh, I'm sorry, no, actually, I was ready for that. I've heard of things like that. People have done. So, what I did, I tried to start a fire the other day on this mountain trip I was on with magnifying glass and was extremely successful within like a minute and a half of actually starting a fire with just using a little magnifying glass. Then I heard a story of somebody that had a yurt, and the yurt has there's those round nomadic buildings that they had from Nepal, various places. It has a round kind of a hole in the top, or in North America when you build this, it's a window, but this particular individual didn't put the window in, just put plastic, clear plastic, and went to work. It rained, the plastic filled up with water, and when he came home, there was a burn mark across the floor. Over all his furniture, his stereo, and his carpets, from the sun reflecting through this water. Now, Peter Kingley has gone out, that was just an aside, it was a cool story. Peter Kingley has gone out, as a matter of fact, when they were launching, or when they did a tour with Stephen Harper of this, of the Blue Nose, he hauled out his solar mirror, and he made little Blue Nose medallions to give to the Prime Minister and his entourage. And of course, the Prime Minister was primarily interested in the Blue Nose and photo op and whatever. So Mr. Kinley handed him this medallion and said, by the way, this was cast using only the sun as input to melt it. And right to your left here, Mr. Prime Minister, is the mirror. According to Peter, he said the Prime Minister did not even look, would not avert his eyes to the left, was literally 20 feet away. And he said, I hope you're getting rid of that. So there's a certain unwillingness out there in this particular area for change. I mean, a willful ignorance. And so Peter Kinley has submitted this thing, which he has the copyright on the patent on. And he submitted it to Suncor. Why don't we use, at least part of the time, the sun to melt the bitumen? And there is no response. Of course, you can supplement it with natural gas. But, I mean, if you can melt 5 pounds of bronze in 20 minutes, that's the first heat. The second heat only takes 10 minutes. Like, what the hell is wrong with this? It's totally feasible. I've seen this stuff, right? But somehow we convince the people. The only way we convince them, I think, is to present them with the visual. So we introduced our good friend John Little, who's a blacksmith, to Peter Kinley. And he got over there with this big iron bar and turned it red hot, and then forged it. Get that on television, get people to believe that it's possible, and they're going to go like, why am I buying fuel again?
So you said Masdar, and I have heard of that and seen some photographs of the incredible engineering, and I guess just along these lines, I would urge you to Google a guy named Ed Mazria, M-E-Z-R-I-A. He's a very famous architect, and he came and spoke at my university about 4 months ago, 5 months ago. He wrote a famous book almost 20 years ago now called It's the Architecture Stupid. And this was, of course, extremely offensive to his fellow architects because they feel pretty strongly that they're God's gift to human culture. And it turns out that this is something I hadn't realized, and I'm not 100% sure it's true, but he claims that something like 50% of energy in the world is used in buildings. And that architects or their predecessors have known for thousands of years how to build buildings to use natural light and natural heat, airflow, and so forth. And only in the 20th century did they come unhinged and start building, glass buildings in Edmonton and things like that. And that there's actually a whole movement in architecture called, I think it's called net zero construction, where the life cycle costs of the building are zero. The net life cycle carbon and energy costs of the building, including transporting the building materials there and construction itself, and yada, yada, yada. The thing actually has to generate more energy to make up for all that. And he has now rallied the 8 big architecture firms in the U.S., and I don't know how this stacks up with the rest of the world, but they account for something like 85% of all commercial construction in the United States. To sign a pledge that by 2030, every building they design will be net zero energy. So, I mean, I think these things are surprisingly doable. And instead of just saying, oh my God, it's the end of the world, you just got to get with the program.
Okay, thank you for that question. Jill is next.
I participated in the 2010 Under Western Skies conference. I left on Saturday afternoon deeply depressed after the panel. So I complained to Ron and Mario about that. I'm glad that they and the organizers of the Institute are did it for you. And we certainly like to thank all of you for accepting this. So on Saturday afternoon, I was so depressed, and this was the night that the film I did, The Power of Nature, was just premiering in Calgary. And on Saturday night, it just
drove downtown and I needed something. That movie, if you have not seen it, The Power of Nature, it's sort of a bit of a choice. I don't think I will need to do this again, but this being said, I think it was about 20 or 25 years ago that Baby Suzuki was on campus in one of the old gyms at Mount Royal College, talking about zero growth. Where are we 25 years later? I think the question I had was about sustainable development, and I think Mario, you already asked that question in a way. Is it going to take a radical shift, right? A revolution, right? But sustainable development, correct me if I'm wrong, is not something I've heard in the panels. So I think the idea of sustainable development is something that's being talked about, but I would just offer to the question, what are your thoughts about this? And if you think the question for the
I was once on a plane and I met a forester. He said we have a sustainable forest running for First Nations group in the States, somewhere in California. I said, oh, cool, that is awesome. Let's talk about that. I said, so what do you guys harvest? He said, well, we harvest the trees and then we let them grow back. I said, so what's the oldest tree? Well, some of them are like 800 years old. I said, oh, good. You let 800-year-old trees grow back? Well, no. I said, well, that's not the sustainable forest practice. If the next generation can't do what you just did, then, or even the next, 6 centuries, then it's not sustainable. And I think we've taken a pretty large initiative with the community there to build something that we thought was sustainable. We looked into those net zero houses in Edmonton, and there are houses in Edmonton, and now quite a few in Europe, and all over the place. There are these net zero or plus energy houses. They actually, like Scott said, are creating more energy than they consume. It's totally possible. All of this is possible, and it's just a will. With current technologies, we have the possibility to build a completely sustainable world if we have enough time. But the biggest thing is that we have no will. Right now, our solar panels are, the efficiency is somewhere around 13 to 18%. We're just not. If we focus on it, as I said earlier, the potential lies in increasing that. If we can do it with current technologies, according to Avery Robbins and his team of 80 people, specialists, then of course we can build a sustainable future. But we have to, the reason I don't have a straw bale house is because I was terrified to invest in something that is unproven. So now we have a community center that's made out of straw bales, so that all the kids in the area go, oh shit, that's a no-brainer, we could build a straw bale building. Because we had a community center that was made out of it. And we're getting now other communities that are coming to us, just as I went to the Net Zero House, just like I went to Craig, Saskatchewan, where they built a sustainable building there, the Eco Center in Craig, Saskatchewan. And of course, people bitch like crazy about these buildings, right? Because it disproves their paradigm. But you know what? The proof is on the ground. It exists. And the people are coming from other places and going, wow, this place is busy and it's happy, and it's like, well, it's not happy, but it's busy. And it will be happy once the politics die out. But anyway, people complain. Somebody said the other day at the last board meeting, the urinals don't have any water in them. You know, that's right. Nowadays, actually, most urinals in new buildings don't. I've never seen one. Well, I don't know. Now you have.
Okay, we have 2 questions just on this side of the room. What are you comfortable speaking on here, or should I let you run?
I was just going to add to this thing about sustainable. I don't know how many of you went to see the talks on permaculture, but one of our local folks in town runs a permaculture company. I went on a tour of his house last year, and he was saying we only use 10% of the energy we used to use. I'm not okay. Okay. He was saying that we only use 10% of the energy we used to use. We cut our fuel bills by 9%. Wow, knowing that these two years, why we get years, I was like, oh, they've got some fancy, blah, 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 some better than doing this. No, they just insulated the house with triple glazed windows. It's like, that's easy.
There's the Alberta Sustainable House here in North Calgary. Somewhere around Thurston Trail, one of the subdivisions there.
And a guy by the name of York Ostrowski, he uses 1 cord of wood to heat the entire building. And it's a full-size house. It doesn't look a little, you know, quite as the same as all the other houses. But he built that, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, right? And it recycles all of its water, its composting toilets, and it just uses almost no energy, right? And then the cord of wood that he uses, he gets from the scraps from a cabinet shop. So as a result, he doesn't have to, you know, go out and make all of that extra money, or even have a furnace, or, you know, it's all possible. If it can happen in Calgary, right down the street, and this house is open to the public. You know, you can make an appointment to see it, and it's quite something. It looks, you know, it's a comfortable house. So I don't know, like, we just have to be aware of these things, go out there and have a look. And if you can melt bitumen using the sun, then pretty soon people are going to go in, why are we melting bitumen? And we'll just bypass the bitumen altogether.
My husband and I built a straw bale house 6 years ago, and we have we have panoramic, I'll say, pretty old basic. Windows on the first floor and on the second floor, and we have a circle on the top, so we've got a lot of natural lighting, and we use a clothesline for our dryer. But I was just thinking, I grew up in a log shack up lined with straw, so it's no different from, it's just fancier, you know? And I think, I always laugh at mainstream society because they talk about composting, we call it the slop pail. And, you know, they call, what did you call that toilet? The composting toilet, but we just called it the toilet in the bush, you know, made of plastic. So it's very sustainable.
Well, you know, this question of sustainability is a complicated one. I don't know what the word means. I once wrote an essay called The Shaky Ground of Sustainable Development because I thought the words development and the word sustainable are both completely undefined and undefinable. When you put it together, you get a total morass. I finally decided that the word sustainable is a lot like the word justice. Everybody has a different definition of it. Everybody has a different definition. But that's okay. We still think justice is important to talk about and have a conversation groups and so on about what we ought to mean by it. There are some people who are sure they know what it means, and everybody else ought to see it the same way, but that's not going to happen. So I think the word sustainability is it's a word to start a conversation about what are the limits, how do we live within them, how do we in some sense try to transcend them if we can, where it's necessary. We don't want to be limited completely in every way. If we look at it in that way, it's a conversation about how to do things differently. Then it seems to me that's all we can do, and that really means talking about growth and limits together. Accepting that growth is a great idea in some respects. It's not a bad thing to have some things grow, but how do we also acknowledge limits within that? And then we've set the problem in clearer terms, I think. We can't be quite self-righteous, or should we know what it means, or that there's some kind of scientific definition for us to develop.
So I guess since it means anything, I get to see what it means, right? So I think sustainable means you get to keep doing it better. Well, but I mean, I think that's what it means as a word is that you get to keep doing it. And
Your lifetime or your children?
well, yeah, I don't know. I guess it is forever. Good question. So let's begin with a conversation. So development. Where's development going on? John has talked about going to China for the next 3 months, and I went to China last spring, and somebody told me, and I can't cite this. John can correct me if I'm wrong. That in China, by 2025, which is 13 years from now, they expect to build new cities, new residential infrastructure, new commercial infrastructure, new transportation infrastructure, energy, everything. New cities with 350 million people in the next 13 years. That's as many people as live in North America. It took us, 150 years to build it here. And the Chinese are going to build that much infrastructure in the next 13 years. And that could be scary, or that could be a heck of an opportunity if we know how to build sustainably. Where better to learn how to do that than in a place that we're building North America's worth of infrastructure in 13 years. The world is just rocketing forward, and whether it kind of seems like it might be too late to build sustainable infrastructure in North America. At least, I guess we have to rebuild sustainable infrastructure in North America. But there's a big world out there where infrastructure is being built, where development is happening, and seems like an opportunity.
But we rebuild the infrastructure of every city in America every 20 or 30 years. Is that true? Well, I'm not exaggerating, but how long are these buildings going to last that we put up now, or highways and stuff? We've got to repave them. We've got, the amount of reconstruction we've done on this continent over the last 40 or 50 years. So, what will 40 or 50 years more do? I think the problem is not in building housing. That's easy. You can do straw bales and make a huge difference. But how do you build an entire industrial economy on renewable energies? Fossil fuels have been, we're talking about energy that's stored for millions, hundreds of millions of years that came online. There's not going to be a replacement for that. And I don't think there's going to be any way we can build the kind of industrial society we build in any country in the world on renewable energies, windmills and solar systems. So we're going to have to reinvent the whole concept of industry, what an industrial society is about.
I read recently that there was 1,000 watts, a sunny day, 1,000 watts per square meter that you could catch it in sunlight. And, judging by the melting bronze, going, yeah, probably. One of those space heaters is 1,500 watts, just to give you a sense. And so we just have to figure out how to do that. And then if we reduce our usage by 70%, change the types of materials we're using, like turn it into carbon fiber instead of having to melt steel to make cars, make things that Amory, I mean, I'm getting all of this stuff from Amory Lovins and the Rocky Mountain Institute. So I mean, I would urge everyone to go to the RMI.org, I believe it is, and read the book that he's written. It's called Reinventing Fire. And he's talking the possibility of doing this in the next 30 years. And when I read and hear him speak, I'm going like, this is totally believable. This is a scientist making this stuff, feasible for us to understand. And they just refurbished in team with the owner of the building, and they just refurbished the Empire State Building as a signature sort of a project, and reduced the energy usage of that building by something like 60%, which will pay for itself in just like a decade. Well, of course, for the landlord of that place, it's great. First, in many ways, it's not just the energy consumption, but also the publicity you get for both of them. You're working with Walmart. Walmart's got the biggest trucking fleet in the world. And they reduced their energy usage for the fuel of those trucks, working with RMI, by 60% in 5 years. Like, it's ridiculous. It's all possible. And they're working with the U.S. military, where they realize that the casualties on those convoys, that's where most of your casualties are, is trucking fuel back and forth. So it makes sense to have at your point of destination some kind of generation capability to not have to haul so damn much fuel. I mean, these are basic, simple, answers. If they can answer that in just a few years, one little think tank of 80 people, what the hell else is possible?
We have time just for one more question. I'm sorry, it's the perils of things getting going. It's very interesting, but time is of the essence. Here.
So I'm a student here at Mount Royal University, and I'm studying ecotourism and outdoor leadership. And I actually, this is kind of unrelated, but I have a question about sustainability in building, because I'm working on a project, but that's not where I'm headed. So to me, what I do, like what ecotourism means to me is connecting people through experience and use of all their senses to the natural world. And through that, it allows people to have the choice to change their lives and to further explore and honor that connection to the natural world. And once people begin to love and see the environment they're around, they begin to love and protect the things that they know. So that's where I'm coming from. And then for me to come here to this conference and learn about, why are we connecting people to the natural world? Well, there's all these really critical problems, and they actually need to be addressed because they're really critical. So it's really refreshing for me to come here, and it feeds me purpose for what I do, and I certainly am stoked to be here. and I'm happy to hear that, so often it comes up like, well, you're the next generation, and it's up to you to change the future of the planet, and it's often overwhelming and frustrating. Like you're leaving the bill for us kind of thing. Not like there should be a war, but sometimes it feels like that. So it's nice to hear that there's like movers and doers who aren't just leaving the bill for our generation. And like you were just saying, I came across in my studies, The 6 Symptoms of the Sick Society, and I looked into it and I said, wow, they really nailed this. That's kind of cool. And then I looked and I said, oh, it's written over 100 years ago. And they nailed it then, and we're seeing these patterns now, and it's, oh my God. And then you look even further back into like ancient writings, and wow, this is primal stuff, like just the idea of living within your own needs, and why are we continuing to live, you know, like going down this road of destruction and this economic craze for money. And I think Benedict said it yesterday, and he had a quote, we send our children to places that will never relinquish them instead of teaching them to take care of each other and the ground under our feet. And I really like that. So I tried to make this all into one nice question, but it only just opened up a million more questions that are huge. Yes, so just comments, advice, and maybe not for me, but my generation as a whole. Okay, thanks.
She wasn't a plant. No, it has such a concluding remark sense to it. It might look like she's a plant, but actually, you know.
How old are you?
21.
21. I have this theory that that we should have people your age running the world. That the rest of us should give it up. And you know, I look at the demographic structure of all societies, not just North American society, but you know, what we have is an older and older and older population of people who are richer and richer and richer, just a general trend, and who shut out people your age from power making and decision making. And I think it would be a pretty fascinating thought experiment to just turn it all over to people who are between the ages of about 13 and 26, who neuroscientifically speaking have the best brains of the species, and who are wired biologically to solve problems creatively. So we may have wisdom, but you have problem-solving capacities, and you need to understand how you fit into the world in ways that we don't at my age. And yet, my generation and much older control the power. So I vote for teenagers ruling the world.
One of the neighbor people there, a young woman, I think she was 16 when she wrote the words, and you know, her parents worked in the industry. She said one of the lines was, the pocket's full, the future's empty. And you know what? I've heard someone here, you know, of the older generation saying, you know, like, it's up to you guys, and I heard that in my generation. And when I was young, and you know what? We got the freaking money, you fix the problems. Like, forget it, right? Like, you guys need to take over, like, just like Alana said. Unfortunately, missed your talk, Alana. I would have loved to have heard that. But I think it's time for a revolution. It could be a peaceful revolution. So, you know what? All you gray hairs, just sit back. You can advise us, whatever. We're actually going to make the bloody decisions because it's our future that's at stake.
I'm a gray hair, and I'm not going to quit.
You can be the wisdom of
I know a lot of teenagers who are 21 years
who are great, and foresighted, and thoughtful, and committed, but I know a lot of 21-year-olds who are not. Everywhere. Well, I think we shouldn't say one generation or another has all the wisdom or all the drive and so on. This ought to cross all kinds of age groups, but so I'm not willing to turn over the world to people 13 years old, frankly, and put all the old people out the pasture. But a lot of old people like to just wash their hands of these issues, and they ought to be just as engaged in something because they have children and grandchildren they have to care about.
been very patient with our unorthodox system here. I'd just like to say to the men right here that when Robert Bachman and I started to imagine these unorthodox gatherings, we didn't know if they'd fly. And we really appreciate the panelists and the same with the ones that came up the first time, agreeing to this eclectic grouping and coming to Calgary, which is globally a pretty important nexus at this time, which I think is where this conference is going to stay. I'm so tired from this conference, I can't do justice to how all of your respective talks were and how much I enjoyed this conversation today. So I'm just going to ask everybody to give you a round of applause, and on behalf of my questions, guys, thank you so much. See you in 2014. Thanks, everybody.
Can you give it up for Robin?